Shalom everyone, and welcome to another episode of In Second Thought by Hadran. Part of the discussions in Masechet Menachot is describing the tools of Beit HaMikdash and the Mishkan, and of course, one of the most important objects in the Mikdash was the Menorah. And I want today to look a little bit to follow the history of the Menorah as we find it from the Midbar all the way to Beit Sheni and even further. So let me share the sources and we'll move in. The first place we hear about the Menorah is in Parashat Truma, where God is ordering Moshe to order Bezalel to make the Menorah. You shall make a lampstand of pure gold. The lampstand shall be made of hammered work. Its base and its shaft and its cups and its calyxes and petals shall be of one piece. It's a one piece of gold, of pure gold. The lampstand, the Menorah, is going to be in the Heichal, and in the room which is second in holiness to Kodesh HaKodashim. In that Heichal, there's also Shulchan, the table with Lechem Apanim, with the bread, and the golden ark, the golden mizbeach of the Ktoret. In the next place we hear about the Menorah is in Shmot Lamed Zayin in Parashat Vayakel, when they actually do it, Vayas, and he made the lampstand of pure gold, he made the lampstand and its base, etc., and the rest of the things. One more place we hear in the Chumash about the Menorah is in Sefer B'Midbar, when there is a re-mentioning of the Menorah, V'zeh Ma'aseh HaMenorah, Miksha Zahav. Now this is how the lampstand was made. It was hammered work of gold, and hammered from the base to the petals, according to the pattern that God had showed Moshe. So was the lampstand made. In other words, it's exactly how God showed it to Moshe. Nobody, added anything. It's the Menorah as Moshe saw by God. Another place in the text, in the Bible, when we hear about the Menorah, is we're already moving to Beit Rishon. And Shlomo HaMelech, King Shlomo, when he built the Mikdash and built most of the vessels anew, and Shlomo made all the furnishing that were in the house of God, the altar of gold, the table for the bread of display of gold, and the lampstands, 5 on the right side and 5 on the left, in front of the shrine of solid gold and its petal and lamps and tongues and gold. In other words, there's a surprise here. Shlomo not only making what we're supposed to make, but instead he didn't make 5 tables of the bread of display or 5 altars of gold, but he makes 10 menorah, 10 lampstands, 5 on the right and 5 on the left. And that is a surprise. But when we continue to see in Masechet Menachot, the discussion in Masechet Menachot talks about the fact that Shlomo HaMelech made 10 menorot and not 1, and what was the weight of all of them, etc., and the pure of the gold. But I want to focus, as I said before, on the lampstand. And one of the Baraitot in Masechet Menachot says, it is taught, Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, says, an ark of fire and a table of fire and a candle broom of fire descended from the heaven, and Moshe saw and fashioned in their likeness, as it is stated, and see that you make them after their pattern, which is being shown to you in the mount. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu, the Gemara is telling us that Moshe Rabbeinu saw a description of fire, of all these 3 major elements that are in the Heichal, and he made all of them exactly as was shown in the on the mount as God showed him. But when we focus on the menorah, the Gemara will ask, what's the purpose? What's the function of the menorah? And two of them, the altar of gold, we understand. The altar of gold is for the ktoret, it's for the incense to be sacrificed upon. But a table with bread and a lamp, what do we do with that? Continues the Gemara in Menachot and asks, do we need light in the Heichal? And of course, we don't need light in Eichal. We know that the way that Shlomo built the windows was such as there's a lot of light in the Mikdash. So why do we need the lamp? And the answer is God instructed Aaron to kindle the candle lantern outside the curtain of the testimony of the tent meeting, because it is testimony to all humanity that the divine presence rests amongst the Jewish people. In other words, the menorah that the Kohen Gadol meets and the people of Israel knows it's there in the Eichal, outside of the curtain of the testimony, in the tent of meeting, again, which is Oil Moed or Kodesh HaKodeshim, is there to say that there is Shekhinah b'Yisrael, that everyone, the entire world should know that the menorah is there to show, not as a need, there's no function of light, but there's function of testimony that God dwells and the Shekhinah dwells among the Jewish people. Again, not in the Mikdash only, but among the Jewish people. And if you're going to say, well, if it's a building needs lots of light, then we will ask you, and if your questions say, how is this testimony, perhaps the candle labrum is lit for illumination? To this, God would respond, do I need its light? But isn't it so that for all 40 years that the Jewish people walked in the wilderness of Sinai until they entered Eretz Israel, they walked exclusively by His light and from the pillar of fire that was guiding them at night? If God provides light for others, He certainly does not need it Himself, and rather, eventually, the illumination of the candle broom labrum is testimony to all humanity that the divine presence rests among the Jewish people. And repeats it. They didn't need it in the desert for light, but still there was a menorah. Again, go back to the testimony for everyone else, for all humanity, that God, divine presence, rests among the Jewish people. I just want to show you a little sketch of the inner side of the temple. The Kohen would move from the Ulam to the Heichal, and in the Heichal, the first object is the golden ark, where the incense was sacrificed upon, and then we have the menorah at the south, and lechem apanim, shulchan lechem, the table of the bread at the north. In other words, this is where the Kohen Gadol had to go through once a year before he entered Kodesh HaKodeshim, and that's where he was often, make sure the candles are okay, the bread was that they had to switch from time to time. But that's a center place. The Heichal is a center place in the Mikdash, with only three vessels, three objects that are important. Importance is, invaluable. Another place where we hear about the menorah is in Zechariah. In Zechariah, we are already speaking about the beginning of the second temple, the temple that was built by Nehemiah and the returners from Bavel. And in the Nevuot of Zechariah, in chapter 4, which is the Haftarah of the Parashat Be'alotcha and the Shabbat of Chanukah, and there the Navi is being shown a vision. He doesn't understand what he sees, but he can describe what he sees. And he said to me, what do you see? And I answered, I see a lampstand all of gold with a bowl above it, and a lamp on it, are 7 in number, and the lamp above it have 7 pipes. And and by it are two olive trees, one on the right of the wall and one on its left. In other words, let me show you how it looks like. This is the menorah that Zechariah envisions, like he sees in the Malach shows him, and that's the description that we have in the beginning of the second temple. We have 7 kanim of the menorah, gold, and the 2 trees above it, like covering it from the 2 sides, and the balls of water just to show fertility and waterness and livelihood. This is the menorah that Zechariah sees. When we move to the end of the second temple, during the time of Josephus says, when he describes the menorah, he says that the candles alluded to the 7 planets because that was the number of branches coming out of the menorah. The number 7 of the menorah, and number 7 becomes a heavy typological number in the region, but we have it so much in the Torah. It represents the 7 planets, and I want to say that maybe what Josephus wants to tell us, that in the midst of the Mikdash we had echo of who created the world, and the menorah with the 7 branches echoing the 7 planets of the world above us that surrounded creation goes back to the beginning, the creation of the world by God. In a different place, Josephus is adding and saying, and indeed the workmanship of this menorah was different from all of the menorot that we have. From the base, the trunk rose in the middle, and from its thin branches, which is shaped, resembled a pitchfork. It describes how they created the menorah. They started from the base, and then the body, and then the branches. But he says that the shape of the branches resembles pitchforks. In other words, they're straight, they're not round as we think usually of a menorah. And at the top of each branch was a bronze lamp, and the number of the branches was 7. This time he says, in honor of the 7 days of the week for the Jews. And here Josephus is pinpointing something different. The importance, the significance of the menorah is the new orders of days that Torah is bringing to the world. There's a 7th holy day that creates a unit of 7 days, which is a chidush. Okay, it doesn't connect to anything natural, not sunrise and sunset, or the moon or the sun. That's a godly, that's a divine decision. And the menorah reminds us again, the menorah with the 7 branches reminds us again of the creation in the midst of the Mikdash, again echoing the Shekhinah, the fact that God's Shekhinah dwells in the Mikdash and amongst the Jewish people. The fact that Josephus describes the branches as resembling pitchfork begins an enormous disagreement in Jewish history of what was the shape of the menorah in the Mikdash and in the Mishkan. And our Gemara in Menachot is also echoing Josephus when it says that in the time of the Chashmonaim, the lamp was not fashioned from wood, but from spit of iron, and they covered them with tin. And later they grew richer, and they covered them with silver, and then they again grew richer, and they made it out of gold. But we can say that here the Gemara is saying that the branches were made out of spits of iron, and again that's a very straight shape, and it echoes what Josephus is saying. And indeed, we have a shape of a menorah that we found in Dura Europus. Dura Europus was a village up in Syria area that was established in the 4th century BCE, and we know that there was a Jewish settlement there. We have remains of that Jewish settlement we found at the 3rd century CE, and in archaeology, the shul was found, and all the walls of the shul were covered with paintings of stories from the Tanakh, from the Bible, and Jewish elements. And the menorah in the shul of Dura Europis was as followed, like the Gemara is saying, and like Josephus is describing. It's straight branches. And indeed, that form of menorah, Rashi adopted that description, Maimonides adopted that description, and also the Rebbe of Chabad adopted that description, as opposed to the shape that we know of round branches that we found in the gate of Titus. Like the menorah, in the gate of Titus, the description of the vessels that the Romans bring from Jerusalem to Rome, the menorah there is very apparent, and it has round branches. And also in archaeology, in old shuls of Eretz Israel for the second temple, and during the time of the second temple, and after the destruction of the temple, we found many menorot in Eretz Israel at the 1st centuries CE that are made with round branches. So this is going to stay, I guess, as a disagreement till Mashiach will come and tell us exactly how the menorah looked like. But I want to show you another piece of history that the menorah made, and that is in the establishment of the state of Israel. Because when the early state of Israel was the first Knesset, the temporary Knesset member, they knew they needed a symbol for the country, and they asked the people to give it options, and they received 450 different symbols that people drew and thought would be mat'im, and the one that was accepted at 1949 was made by 2 brothers, Maxim and Gavriel Shamir, and they made the menorah with round branches, but they added the motif from Zechariah with the 2, not trees of olives, but branches of olives, symbolize peace, symbolize unity of the people, and this is the symbol of the state of Israel. But I want to end with another symbol, another piece of history that the menorah made in Jewish history, and that one came from Jewish mysticism and Jewish secret learning around Psalm 67. Psalm 67 has 8 psukim, 8 verses in it, and the way that Jewish tradition wrote that psalm is in the shape of a menorah. The first, L'Menatzeach ben Ginot Mizmor Shir, is the title, and then each of the 7 psukim were written in the shape of a menorah, where the middle pasuk is the longest pasuk. It's the middle and the base of the menorah, and it has 49 letters, and Jewish secret learning is making a lot out of this psalm as a segula for protection, for good health, and in some traditions, Jewish traditions, it's been said a few times a day. Many of the shuls have this exact picture of the menorah, of the psalm in the shape of a menorah as part of the decoration of the shul. And I want to show you one thing that Abu Draham, Rabbi David Bar Yosef, who was a Jewish scholar from Spain in the 14th century, and this is what he writes about this psalm in the shape of a menorah. He who reads it every day is considered to be lighting the pure menorah in the temple, and thus receives the presence of the divine presence. In other words, Rabbi David Abu Draham is telling us that the menorah, indeed, we don't have the mikdash anymore, and we don't even have the menorah because it disappeared. But we have something that resembles the menorah, and every time we say this psalm that is shaped as a menorah. It's as if we lit us, not the Kohen, us. We lit up this golden, pure menorah, and we remind ourselves and others that God's presence is still dwelling amongst the people. And I think it's a beautiful way of again a method that Am Yisrael adopted. There is no mikdash, we'll do chesed. There is no mikdash, we'll daven 3 times a day. There is no menorah, we'll read a psalm in the shape of a menorah, reminding ourselves of God's presence and of the pure gold. And maybe also tells us, that in order to have God's presence in our life, we also need to try to be pure.